Joining me and Steve today on the Pocket Mastermind podcast, we've got Karl Lillrud. Did I pronounce that correctly? I hope so.
Yeah, actually, quite good.
Excellent. Long-time entrepreneur, business coach, mentor, 2 times TEDx speaker, ice swimmer, I've also seen, a little bit crazy, and also author of 4 books, of which we'll talk about the latest one today. Karl, welcome to the Pocket Mastermind podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming to join us. So yeah, give us a little bit of a background. There's an awful lot to talk about in that long list of an intro.
Yeah, exactly. So we better pick something rather than trying to cover it all.
I see you've been an entrepreneur since the age of 16. I'm quite interested to talk about how you got started there, really, where a lot of kids obviously go straight from school into maybe higher education and into some kind of job cycle, and you obviously took a slightly different path. So I'd be interested to understand the starting point of all of that, really.
The greatest difference is that I started the job cycle quite early, and the simple answer.
School, or
sorry,
was that by were you working while at school, or?
I started my company, the first company, when I was 16, right. And so I was working with that company when I was not in school, obviously. Mm-hmm. And the simple question.
What were you doing?
So the company I was running was an IT consultant company, and we helped organizations with their IT needs. And this is back in 1996. IT needs was quite limited, but the problems were rather complex because the IT infrastructure wasn't really designed for for all type of users. And at that particular time, there was not that many people working within the IT field. So when I approached my clients and said that I could help them with basically anything, they were quite happy with that, and I got more and more clients, and larger and larger organizations were contracting me. So that's where it all started.
How did you come to know so much about networks at that young age?
Just spending a ridiculous amount of time playing with all these different setups on my own and with my friends. So a true nerd, so to say. And I spent my weekends carrying computers on buses and trains with my friends just to connect them for a couple of hours. And then we had to carry everything back again. So no help from parents or anything. It's like they just told us, like, yeah, if you want to carry all your stuff through the entire Stockholm, then that's up to you guys, but we won't help you.
There's a lesson in there somewhere where all the kids were out hanging around the park and you guys were carrying computers across Stockholm.
Yeah. and we're not talking about laptops here. We're talking about you have this desktop that's like 25 kilos, and then you have a large screen that's like 40 kilos. Like, crazy.
How on earth did you carry that stuff around?
Yeah. Just imagine like four or five boys getting on a bus and everybody's just trying to help each other out carrying this monitor.
You probably look like you stole the stuff.
Yeah.
Was there was it extra hard to get into companies being so young? Was there being 16, was it difficult to convince large organizations to trust you with their network, or would you say that possibly then that industry was quite young at that time, so actually you may have been best placed for it, being young and teaching yourself technology?
Yes, it was a problem when they asked how old I was.
Right.
So some did not ask, and they just like, okay, so this is like a consultant company and this is a consultant that is going to help us out. And some therefore did not ask if I was running the company or if I just was like an employee. And also, as I understood their situation and could actually explain how to solve the problem straight away, they sort of trusted my ability based on the knowledge that I shared with them straight away.
And how long were you then running that business for?
I was running that business till 2002, and then I started another business, which was the first e-commerce site in the Nordic countries, like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, which were selling interior design products online. So that was another very, very interesting business where I learned a ton of things, because e-commerce at that stage was basically just books and CDs. And people didn't really trust internet because there was many things that didn't work as good as it should, and that's been improved since then. But the challenge that I saw, or that we experienced when we were starting this company up, was that the suppliers, they didn't get what we were doing whatsoever. And like, yeah, okay, so when we approach a supplier, they said, yeah, okay, so we take orders over a cup of coffee. And I told them, no, we're gonna like automate we have an automated order procedure where we will send you an email, and then you just pick and pack that order and send it to our customer. And they're like, email? What's that?
This was really early days of drop shipping, I suppose.
Yeah. But then I follow up with, because I had that response from so many suppliers. They're like, okay, so if you don't have an email address, we can send it by fax. And we're like, fax? What's that?
You got caught somewhere between the 2000s and the 80s, didn't you?
Yeah. So they were back to what they started off with. Like, yeah, we take orders over a cup of coffee.
So I guess the experience with the previous business and setting up of all of other people's infrastructure was probably beneficial towards setting up that business, an e-commerce business, and connecting with suppliers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And also at that young age, actually being able to talk with the CEOs and so on at the companies that I was helping with their IT needs at first, that helped me to be able to express myself in a good way when I met with these suppliers at the later stage. Mm-hmm. So I were confident in how to speak with them, and also confident about our product and our offering, like the system behind it and the structure and the process and everything. And I could dig into whatever detail they want to know more about.
And what led you to move from the first business to the second business?
I was moving from London to Sweden because I moved to London first, where I met my wife, and then we decided to move back to Stockholm. And by doing so, we also realized that the possibility to find some really nice design furniture in Stockholm was quite limited. And I looked into the market and realized that, okay, so if I want to import something, the product will not or the shipping will not cost that much more if I actually import 2, 3, or 4 of the same item. Mm-hmm. So couldn't I just sell the other items and make some money on that would actually pay for the item that I wanted? And that's where it all started, because I wanted some nice design furniture for our apartment.
What happened to the first business? Did you sell it, or did you just dissolve it?
It sort of faded out into me working with larger and larger organizations, and at one point I was working for one client only full time, and then it was at one point they told all the consultants that they would fire all consultants and just work with employees. So it was at one stage quite easy for me to just jump on the train and see what else I would like to do. I'm always on that train, trying to figure out new things to do and just challenging myself. So it wasn't that I was giving up on the previous business. It was more that I wanted to do something more with my life and try something else out.
Get that?
Yeah, I think you got to keep reinventing somewhere along the line. Otherwise, one lifetime, it might not be the longest time period, but for one person to do the same thing over and over again, as used to be the more of the common case, I think it's not necessarily up my street for sure.
Yeah, and there's more to life. I mean, we now know that we can do so much more.
Yeah, definitely.
And there are some people that believe in making use of every hour or every waking hour of their day. And there are some people that believe that a job is somewhere you go to make a living, and then you can use that money to do something that you like.
Mm-hmm.
But why would you waste most of your time doing something that you dislike just to do something you like? Why don't mix it and do something you like all the time?
Completely agree. I think there's a line from Alan Watts. I quote Alan Watts quite often. He says to spend your time doing something you don't like doing, to go on living doing something you don't like doing, is stupid. And it's absolutely true. Why you literally just sustaining yourself to continue to be unhappy? You might as well. That doesn't make a great deal of sense at all when you think
exactly. And I still respect the people that decide that they don't want to do something more inspirational during their work hours. It's just not the way I want to do it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I think, part of the reason we started this podcast and the Pocket Mastermind and speaking to people like yourself is, I think there are a lot of people that really would rather do something else, but don't really know where to start. Entrepreneurship isn't something that's taught, and I think people who naturally lean in that direction more than others end up picking it up, like yourself, at a young age, and then it becomes a way of life. And I think for most of us, we're kind of conditioned into the go to school, get an education, get a job, and then at some point further down the line, we think, hang on, this isn't really what we wanted to do. This isn't what we signed up for. We want to do something else. And then the leap seems much bigger and much scarier, particularly, you get to a point where you might have family and mortgage and all the rest of it. And it becomes much harder, I think, psychologically to make the jump from what's perceived as security into a more unknown, starting from scratch kind of position.
Yeah, definitely. And that is what I do as a mentor as well.
Mm-hmm.
I speak quite much about the people that are entrepreneurs, as I call them, people that want to become entrepreneurs. And most people are in that stage, but most people are also in the stage that you described, that they're so tied up by all the routines and just making up for just making everything work in their everyday life. Like, okay, there's all these activities that the kids needs to go to, and then I need to go to the grocery store, and so on and so on. So they don't find the time to do the things they really like. They're just trying to deliver on all these expectations. And then they get all tangled up in other people's expectations and lose track of their own expectations. What did I expect out of my life? And what is it that I actually wanted to do? Or that might change. What is it that I want to do today?
Mm-hmm.
Or what is it that I want to get out of this year? And most people don't have that mindset whatsoever, because we are sort of taught from school that we just are made to follow some sort of leader. And the leader could be our parents, it could be your boss, it could be the leader of the country or someone else. There's always a leader, and you will not be taught to be the leader.
That's so true. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and that creates a an amazing complexity when you want to become a leader. When
Yeah.
you decide that I want to lead my own life, I want to decide on my own what I want. And you're sort of not allowed to do it that way by the society.
Mm-hmm. So from your own personal perspective, did more of your friends take an entrepreneurial route, or you kind of more of the odd one out from your friend group back at that time?
My friends chose other ways of finding what they wanted to do, but I think almost all my friends tried to pursue their happiness, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to not just get into the routines and just do what everybody else were doing. They actually tried to find their own path, and most of my friends actually chose different paths, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I chose the entrepreneurial path much more than my friends dared to do, so to say.
Quite interesting that they managed to follow something that they were interested in and passionate about, because I think sometimes that can be the challenge. You know, Steve has written about this on a post on our site, but quite often when you try and do something different within a societal group or a family or something, it's not always met with the encouragement you would hope for or expect, because often people subconsciously, and I don't think most people don't mean to do this, but they tend to hold the people around them back so that everybody stays in a safe environment. And if you start doing something different, it can sometimes threaten other people's own identities, I think. And that's the reason I asked that question. Was it interesting at a particularly young age when you go down an entrepreneurial route, how do your friends that maybe follow then the more traditional path, I call it traditional path in modern society, how they then kind of react and view that, and whether they're supportive or encouraging or doubting, that kind of thing?
I have sort of always followed my own path, and that's connected to many things during my time in school and so on. Especially that I'm dyslexic, and I didn't really fit into the school system in that sense. I mean, it was very difficult for me to just memorize things without really understanding them. So I was always digging into the details of things to actually understand why they were the way we were taught that they were, which is kind of interesting, because according to me, if you're told how something is and you are not allowed to question it, then you're not really taught how it is. You're actually just told how it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I was more into teaching myself, so to say, or just trial and error, and just failing until I actually understood what it was and how to use whatever it is. But at that stage, I also knew about different methods to achieve the same goal, or achieve a goal higher than the one that was possible to reach by following the method that was taught to us. And that is where my entrepreneurial mindset started,
Mm-hmm.
by realizing that the world is not always as we're told it is. Just realizing that I can actually choose my own path. I can actually do things in different ways to reach the same goal or another goal.
Did that make for a pretty frustrating school life?
Yes, definitely. No, I mean, as a child, I thought I was stupid, because as we always compare ourselves with others,
Mm-hmm.
I was obviously comparing my scores and my grades with all my friends. And when they went home to do a homework, and I did the homework and spent the same amount of time, and they just went back and they got an A on the test the other day, and I couldn't remember like one thing from whatever I read, because whenever I read it, it said different things, because the words were just jumping around, or I didn't see the logic in it, and so on. So
definitely relate.
From that point of view, for a child, obviously the easiest way to explain it is black or white. okay, either I'm smart or I'm stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And as I don't deliver as my friends, then obviously I must be stupid. It's very sad, but I believe that there's so many children out there that have the same type of experience, because in the beginning it's right or wrong. Everything we're learning is right or it's wrong, and there's nothing in between.
And we're also all put through exactly the same system,
Yeah,
regardless of what your aptitude or where your strengths and weaknesses lie. You know, we can't all fit into a Victorian education system and expect to come out the other end
yeah,
all exactly the same. We're all so vastly different as people.
yeah, absolutely.
And so you touched on a little bit ago around your mentoring and the entrepreneurs. How do you work with people who are, maybe really would like to be going down an entrepreneurial path, but are not able to for, let's say fear reasons, it may be, but basically because they're in the routine of their existing life, and it's perceived to be quite difficult to break away and do their own thing?
Yeah, at first you need to sort of understand where you come from, and understand what it is that you long for, what you dream of, and so on. And many of us are in a situation where we have this underlying desire or need to actually test our own boundaries. Like, okay, if I want to build a house, can I do it on my own, or do I actually need to hire a contractor and let them do all the job? And in most situations, people would probably tell you that no, you should not build your own house, because in reality they don't dare to do it on their own. So they're sort of answering the question if they should build their own house. They're not answering your question if you should build your own house, because they don't know all your abilities, and they don't know how much money you have in the bank and what knowledge you have about all these details. And if you might have spent all the nights just reading up on how to build a house. They're answering the simple question, is it possible for him or her to build a house? And just to protect themselves from a possible failure, they answer by heart and like, no, I think this would be painful, and therefore I should say no. Okay, I should not build a house. No, you should not build a house, is their reply, which is kind of bizarre, because it's so far from what we need. We need the encouragement. We need we need the people around us to support us in these dreams and ventures that we are pursuing, and to actually learn more about ourselves and our abilities, and also to challenge ourselves. I mean, what is life without challenges?
Indeed.
Why did you go into like mentorship? Is it just to challenge yourself? And what was why not just, sail off into the sunset, and, why help other people?
Yeah, so it's actually sort of a full circle story, with me starting my first company, helping organizations to solve their problems. And then that evolved into me building up my own organization, trying to build a really big business online. And then as I did that, I learned that there was quite a few companies that had the problems, or starting to have the problems, that I had many years ago when I built up that organization. So I got back to helping organizations with their expansions and the needs of converting their business to online. Again, as a consultant, I started to help organizations more and more to figure out how they could make more money with what they had, basically, and to organize and to look at their bottlenecks, their problems, and the things that was holding them back. And I've done that for some really, really impressive organizations over the years. And at one point, I realized that I wanted to do something more. I didn't just want to help organizations. I wanted to help people as well. So I started to work more as a keynote speaker, which led me to be invited to speak on a TEDx stage 2 times. And from the audience, people came to me after the presentations and asked questions. And after a while, they started to ask if I could be their mentor and guide them through the situations they were stuck in, and to actually figure out how they could get more out of their life. So that is where the circle is starting to close. But at one point, I also realized that working as a consultant, I reach a certain type of people, and working as a speaker, I reach another type of people. But if I were to write some books, I would reach even more people. And that's where I felt that even though I'm dyslexic, I really like to share my life story and my challenges and how I actually managed to solve all these situations, so that I can inspire and encourage people to do more. And that is what mentorship is all about, to not tell people straight away how to do it, but actually to inspire and educate, and also point them in the right direction, instead of just saying, this is the solution to your problem.
And what was the first experience of writing like? As you say, being dyslexic, how did you approach that? I mean, I've personally never written a book. I'd probably like to at some point, but my ideas jump all over the place. So I probably need somebody to help tame them into a book, because if I wrote it, it'd be all back to front and all over the place, to be honest. But
that's probably how it is for me as well. And I write quite much about how I actually chose to write the book that I'm just about to publish. The previous books was much simpler. There's 2 entrepreneurship books, and there's 1 book about the keynote speaking industry and how to organize better speaker events, because in the speaker industry, there's quite often a brand new team for every event, and these people have not worked together. They don't have the experience of what's needed, and so on and so on. So for these events, there's things that can be done in a better way, in a more structured way. And if you haven't done it a couple of times and you have no clue about what's best and how to get more out of that in particular event that you're organizing. And this 4th book is about me. Mm-hmm. It's a very honest book about all the questions that I was carrying around on my shoulders, that was actually holding me back, that was sort of slowing me down, because my mind was occupied with all these things that popped up in my head, like, so why am I always choosing my own path? Why am I always struggling in these situations? Or why am I handling particular people in particular ways, and stuff like that? Like all these questions that I think most of us are actually struggling with, mm-hmm. or maybe not struggling with, but we do have these questions. And if you don't start by looking at the question, then you're actually just repeating the question over and over again, because at the first time where the question popped up in your head, you probably didn't have the answer, because it was at a younger age. It was at the time where you didn't have the same life experience as you have now, and so on. So even though you have learned the answer to the question, you have actually not figured out how to add 1 + 1 = 2, sort of. Mm-hmm. And so the book is about all these situations I've been in my life, and how that shaped me into the person I am today. But instead of just writing like a memoir, I wrote it as a guidebook with a set of tools to help the reader translate the situations I've been in to their own situations. So each chapter is opening with a question, and then some findings and thoughts around that particular question, followed by some examples, and then a method. And this method is where you convert the situation to your own. And as you mentioned about how to write a book and how to structure a book, this is where it all started. I started in a mind map, just writing down my questions. And when I wrote down the questions, I realized that I actually had the answers to most of the questions. So as I was starting to write the answers, some questions got connected, and I saw how they relate to each other and how they sort of solved the third question. And so it went on and on and on. And after a while, I realized that, okay, so I am the person that was holding me back. And I decided that this finding is something that I need to share with more people, because I spent quite much time on my own trying to figure it out. And I have been in situations where I met with some really smart people over the years, and some of them choose to keep the experiences to themselves. They are probably not trusting that the experience that they have had is of interest to other people. But I know that if I, at a younger age, would have been given this guidebook, so to say, it would have helped me immensely, and it would have made me stronger in these difficult situations.
The thing I find really interesting is that, you know, as you referred to it, as the only thing holding you back was you, and yet, you know, you look at quite a long list of achievement when I introduced you. And that's why I think, you know, part of what we talked about when we launched Pocket Mastermind was helping people to break out of whatever box they're currently in. You know, and that could be anything from underprivileged situation growing up to middle class to anywhere you are currently. And I think what you've just talked about there illustrates it perfectly, that, you know, to some people, they'll be looking up to you and saying, my God, he's done so much. Yet you still have a view that, you know, that you haven't achieved everything you could have done, that you've been holding yourself back. And actually this tool has helped you then to move forwards. And I think it can then be applied to people in all different situations to help move forwards, because we are what holds each other back. Ultimately, we can point to other stuff, but I think it is us, and having tools to be able to identify what it is within us, and so that we're able to move forward is very, very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And at one point we need to decide if we're living the life that we want to live. And most people will be in one situation in their life when they feel that they are not living the life they want to live. And then perhaps they make some drastic adjustments that is not the right ones. Like, for example, they get divorced and they have children, and things will just get in a state where they try to find themselves and what they want to get out of life, but they don't know where to start. So they start with the things that they think is the problem. But in the beginning, it was because they didn't choose themselves at the first state, and therefore they're in a situation where whole their life has just been to follow what other people say.
And yeah, and like you say, that then it manifests itself in a variety of ways. And I think that's where a lot of consumerism comes from, right? You're trying to fill whatever that void is, and like you say, you know, further down the line, you might try and make drastic changes in your life that maybe aren't the solution, or even, you know, or the cause to where you find yourself. And it might just be down to the fact that you're not happy spending your time doing what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of summarizes it all. You should always do what makes you happy. Of course, there will be situations where you need to do something, but you should not have your life structured around all these things that you need to do. You should have your life with things that you need to do, but the base should be things that you want to do. And to many people, it's very difficult, and it's easy to hear me say it, but that is what the mentorship and the book is all about. Like tiny steps to show yourself that you can make changes to your life and find ways to get more out of your everyday situation. It's not about making these drastic changes. It's about building a house brick by brick.
I think it's hugely important, because, you know, when I speak to people, the one thing that becomes quite clear is most of us don't have a vision of what we want our lives to look like. We've got a feeling that it might not be what we have now might not be what we're after. But when you really drill into it and think, well, what is it we do want? I don't think we're particularly good at building long-term visions and goals for what our lives should look like. We kind of move in fairly short-termist, kind of reactionary ways, I think, from school onward.
Yeah. I'm actually preparing the next TED Talk, the third one, which is going to be about the education system and how we're, by following the old education or the current education system, are causing a huge problem for the younger generation, as we are now developing AI, which is not following the same set of rules. Because in the education system, we're taught all these rules. Everything is based on rules. It's, as we just talked about, it's right or wrong. While we educate AI without rules and just a scoring platform. Like, okay, we want you to achieve this goal. It's up to you to achieve the goal, and you can receive this many points if you reach to that particular point. Okay, great. And then the AI start to test itself, trying all these ridiculous methods, and eventually finding one method that lead to the goal, but knows that it can actually receive more points if it keeps on going and finding another method. And eventually it finds another method that will get it a little bit more points. And then it split those ideas or methods up in two pieces, trying to connect those methods and try to be inspired by them, and trying to figure out what other ways there are to get more points, and so on. So this is sort of the entrepreneurial way. Okay, I want to do something. I don't really know how, but I think this will help people, and I will test and test and test again until I reach the method, the tool, the product, or whatever it is that people want. Because even though I know what I want to do, it doesn't mean that that particular thing is what people want. And that's the greatest problem with the education system.
Yeah. And it's kind of, what you just described there, and is really how human history evolved up until we ended up with this, current education system, the factory for humans, as it kind of were, because that's exactly how we evolved. Was, we need to try and do this. Dragging something along the ground isn't great. Let's make something round that rolls, and from there and there, and iteration, and the reward for us was progress.
Yeah.
And now we've kind of lost that. And you look at more developing countries, entrepreneurship is the norm, and then that starts to get phased out with economic growth. You look at India, for example, and China. India in particular, where everyone earns their own income pretty much until large organizations have gone there. And now university graduates are working in contact centers, whereas previously there would have been a lot of family run business, and entrepreneurship was just the norm.
Yeah, exactly. And if we look at the education system, it's sort of built around the old model, where you're sort of born into a state, like in India, where the old caste system, which is now not allowed any longer, but it's still available. It's the same thing in the rest of the world. If you look back, okay, so that is the boy of the factory owner. He won't be working on the factory floor. He will be working by leading the factory. But the education system is built around making sure that he have all the employees he needs to make the factory work in the best possible way.
Yeah, and that kind of work is disappearing, right? You look how fast technology has moved on in the last 15 years, which is only a school kid's journey through school. And you go the day they start to the day they leave, you could have a completely different environment. Yet the education system is still from 1850 or something. So it's hugely outdated. I'll be really interested to see your talk about that.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and some people might not really like it, but it's more of an eye-opener for the people that don't really understand the challenges that the next generation will have as a result of AI.
Yeah, I think it's really insightful. We should talk about the name of your book. We did discuss the book.
Yeah.
Briefly.
So the name is Hacking Your Destiny, and it's connected to all this that all of us know about, that we have a destiny, and it's sort of written in the stars what we are and what we will do in our life. But according to me, it's more of a possibility, and then it's up to you to either make it to that point or to figure out what it is that you believe you can do more of your life, and what you can do to get the most out of your capacity.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really good. I don't know whether you've ever seen there was an interview with David Goggins on impact theory in the States, and talking about the destiny kind of thing. He said he has a vision in his head of, he dies one day, he goes up to heaven, and then there's a board that shows him what he could have been.
Oh.
He looks at him and says, if only I'd have tried. Look what I could have been. So with that vision in his head, he pushes himself every single day to find out what else he's capable of and what else he can do, because he doesn't want to get to the board and find out he could have been something more than he was able to achieve.
That's a really nice thought.
It's quite powerful, I thought.
Yeah. Again, it's all up to you.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want to stand there and watch how your life could have been? That's really interesting.
And just before we wrap up here, I'd be interested to get your thoughts, maybe 3 key things you'd say to any of the people out there, the entrepreneurs as you called them before, anyone who's really thinking about, I want to do something different. What are the first few things, good suggestions you could put forward to anybody in that position?
Yeah, so the first thing is to watch my TED Talk about ice swimming, because I cover the yeah. The thing is that the first TED Talk is about doing the impossible,
mm-hmm.
and to many people, changing your life could seem to be impossible. And I just want to explain step by step how you can actually break down that particular thing into pieces that are quite possible. And by doing so, you will eventually see that everything you do is just a step-by-step process that will eventually lead you to the goal that you want to achieve. And it's the same thing with changing your life. Don't say that you want to start your own business and then quit your job straight away and start your own business, because that will probably not be a good thing to start with if you don't know how to run your business or how to reach your customers and so on. And don't start building on something without knowing how to reach your customers. That is something that I'd say over and over again to everybody I meet. Like, okay, great idea. How will you reach your customers? And if their reply is, I will just buy Facebook ads, then it will probably not fly. Of course, you can buy Facebook ads, but in the beginning, you don't know enough about your customer. You don't know enough about their expectations and their need of your product. So it will cost quite much money before you reach to the point where you pay £1 and you get £2 back.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to figure out a lot more before you can actually start doing ads. And that is what I'm talking about. How will you reach your first 10 customers? Don't think about the first 10,000 customers. Think about the first customer. And then how will that first customer make sure that 10 of his or her friends will know about your service because they just love it? That is how you should start building a great entrepreneurial change in your life.
Mm-hmm. Really helpful advice. I think there's a lot of people out there selling the social media selling dream of pay £10 on Facebook ads and get loads of people come and follow you. I think we had this conversation with another guest a couple of weeks ago who runs a digital marketing business, and if you know what you're doing, you can get great returns from that kind of ad platform. But if you don't, you can spend an awful lot of money learning the hard way.
Yeah, exactly. And you need to understand that from the beginning. The solution to get sales is not to buy customers.
Mm-hmm. It's been fascinating. I'd love to keep talking, and I'd also, hopefully you'll come back and we can talk a bit more about the tools to do the impossible. I think that'd be a great conversation just in itself.
Yeah, of course. I'll be glad to focus more on that topic, because it's definitely a topic itself, and something we can talk a lot about.
Well, we'll make sure that we put a link to the new book, Hacking Your Destiny.
Yeah.
And we'll look forward to speaking to you again in the very near future, hopefully.
Lovely. I look forward to being back on the show soon again.
Great. Cheers, Karl. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.